Regent Pruitt, would you? Yeah, it really was, wasn't it? Some people paid attention, some not. We'll call our Friday meeting to order and have Jane call the roll.
Regent Bartel? Here. Regent Bradley? Here. Regent Crane? Regent Drew?
Regent Crane is here.
Okay. Regent Evers? Regent Falbo?
Here.
Regent Higgins?
Here.
Regent Menydeed?
Here.
Regent Pointer? Here. Regent Pruitt?
Here.
Regent Robert?
Here.
Regent Shervin?
Here.
Regent Smith?
Here.
Regent Spector? Regent Tyler?
Here.
Regent Boskak?
Here.
Regent Walsh? Regent Whitburn?
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. The minutes of the July and September meetings have been distributed. The October minutes will be available before our next meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? I see Chancellor Ward. I want to thank you for the reception last night. It was quite a stunning, really new facility, and with the rich and diverse art that you have in there. And there was a lot of interactions with members of this campus, with the community, and we saw some legislators there as well. We had some good, so thank you again for that, Chancellor Ward. As President Spector said yesterday morning, we are privileged to have members of the UW Colleges and UW Extension Leadership Academy joining us today, and they're here to observe, reflect, ask questions, and generally watch everything that we do. And on behalf of the board, we welcome you again. The Legislative Task Force, we've heard something about recently on the UW Restructuring and Operational Flexibilities, and that was part of the biennial budget bill, of course, met for the first time on Wednesday. And as we all know, Regent Falbo chairs that task force, and I'd like to invite him to give us an update on the group's first meeting. Regent Falbo.
Thank you. I want to point out that Regent Higgins and Regent Tyler on that task
Correct.
force. I want to point that out in case you don't like anything in this report. It was most of it was based on their input. Generally, the task force members are interested in how to make sure that UW is accessible in terms of cost to students while controlling the need for additional revenues and other costs. Issues presented by the members during introductions were the need and desire to examine the relationship between UW and the technical colleges, how it has evolved since the merger, and whether and how it should be revised. Now, some of these things that I'm saying may sound maybe things we haven't talked about or thought about for a while, but I think that's part of the importance of this committee, is that everything's on the table. So even if there's some things that are a bit of a surprise, it's not that we're taking it up as our main emphasis, it's just that we're open to discuss whatever comes up. Yes, ma'am. The need to develop a new contract between the state, UW, and the taxpayers, with a focus on providing and ensuring opportunity for future generations. The task force needs to diagnose the problems that need to be solved. Things cannot continue as is, and changes need to be made. But the task force needs to be able to explain why these changes are being made and the importance of them. The task force should investigate flexibilities that can be provided to institutions and how resources can be used more efficiently. At that point, we had about a 3-hour presentation and Q&A with another Mac. It seems like all our special speakers' names start out with Mac. This was Ames McGinnis. And it seems like they're also from a certain part of the world that Kevin's a little close to. The task force should clearly understand the issues to be addressed, the problems, and the state's culture, especially the expectation of state government's role. Wisconsin has a strong tradition and culture of treating the university system as a state agency, having strict state control over procedures and processes, how things are done. Now, he made a very good distinction that I think is probably going to come back to us quite frequently during the course of our job here on the task force, and that is to separate the what from the how. And that after his talk, somebody said to me, if you looked at the charge of the task force from the legislators, there's a lot of hows in there, and not so many whats. But we'll deal with that as we go along. Some states have moved away from this high, strict state control approach towards an emphasis on how the university assists in meeting the state's goals. Emphasis has been a flexible management model with accountability. Systems governing boards should clearly define missions for institutions with clear lines of authority and responsibility and stay out of hands-on management of campuses. The governing board should set policy and agenda, but avoid one-size-fits-all approaches, need to recognize the differences in missions and capacities amongst our institutions. These goals and measures should be simple, direct, clear, and kept to a core minimum. Basically, the state should determine the long-term goals from the state, understand which of these goals should be met by the university system, create performance accountability measures and expectations for these goals, and then look to buy or fund those services from the university that will help the state achieve its goals. Now, following Ames' presentation, and there is a copy of his presentation, I believe, in your folders. He did an excellent job, and he really kept it. Well, he kept it at kind of a high level, but very simple, trying to get us to be very direct in how we looked at things. The discussion afterwards by the committee covered things such as whether states will provide public funding to public universities and give up state control. And I think his answer to that would be accountability. So there is a trade-off there. The basis of accountability should be what is to be achieved rather than how UW would achieve it. Determining to what extent higher education is considered a public good in Wisconsin, this decision needs to be informed by businesses and other leaders. Education will be critical for economic development and growth. Whether institutions should get flexibilities before achieving the accountability performance metrics or afterwards. What should be the consequences if metrics are not met? Determine the top 2 or 3 accountability benchmarks. The education attainment of the population, ensuring transfer and articulation between institutions and systems. Having a clear set of goals is very important. The goals should not come out of a broad consensus, especially on how to use tuition and student aid to achieve these goals, what tools, implementing, and policy authority are available to institutions to meet and achieve these goals, and should the task force include tech colleges in this discussion and take a broad view of its mission. Mark had some comments about that, by the way, but I won't make them. Additional discussion about the direction of the task force is the task force needs to hear about the issues and concerns affecting all institutions. Task force needs to clarify the problems that need to be addressed. We need to engage all of the stakeholders, business and community leaders, but also UW faculty, staff, and students. Next step should be a presentation by UW System on its goals and accountability quantifiable measures, as it is already doing in probably all of these cases. I think we talked about Kevin coming to the next meeting and present some of these, and again, trying to keep things in a concise and simple manner. I think all of the accountability measures that we might come up with are already being measured. And if we can get them in a form that everybody looks at it and says, oh yeah, there it is, this is what we're looking for. We have a tendency to do so many reports that nobody remembers where something is or was. And that's because we were probably directed by some outside force or by our own Board of Regents to do all of these, and they all are separate. Or a lot of them are separate, I shouldn't say all. Task force should look at training of workers, workforce issues, but also needs to consider the role of each institution within its community. And then some questions arose. Should the task force examine the program array, campus, and administration consolidations, which you might conclude gets to the how again instead of the what. The issues are both money and funding and quality. And how do we do things we need to do more effectively? That really, what Ames did is caused us to go on to a discussion at a very wide level. When I left the meeting, I was a little confused. The next meeting we have to start narrowing it down and really start talking about things we can and will do and can and will propose. But it was a very, very good first discussion, a very good presentation, and it got us all thinking. I think quite a bit outside of the box. Our next meeting is January 11th, and that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Right.
Or try to.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for your work and Mark's work, Tim's work. And is there any questions for Mike? Judy.
Could you speak into the microphone, Judy? I'm getting that look.
You're in trouble already.
Touche.
You're on probation.
Mike, do you have any comments? I know we have talked about, in many ways, about what the role of this board would be in communicating with the task force. Do you have anything more to say to us about that?
Sure. First of all, you're all welcome to come, and I know time constraints don't allow that to a great degree. But what I am doing is I'm spending much more time up here with the staff and with the Fiscal Bureau and with the DOA, because those are the UW staff, Fiscal Bureau, and DOA are the people that are doing all the work behind the scenes. The Fiscal Bureau is kind of the conduit for all information. Brent and I are staying in touch. We've talked 2 or 3 times since before the task force meeting to talk about what we're doing as a Board of Regents and his committee and what the task force is doing to try and make sure that we don't overlap, and as a board we go down a track that's much different than the track the task force is going down. So the communications obviously is very important. So we're doing a lot of things from a communication standpoint to hopefully make sure we're on the same page. We don't have a page yet. The first meeting was just really informative. We're not on a page yet. So there's really not much more to do. Hopefully by the next meeting, by the end of the next meeting, that will be a bigger topic of discussion. But right now, I think the best thing we can do is just keep communicating.
Regent Bartel.
Mike, that page issue is what I wanted to ask you about. I think I heard you say that everything is on the table. And I assume you mean everything in higher education in the state of Wisconsin. And I recall that the legislation called for the task force to address 6 or 7 specific issues. Do you feel that the task force is going to make recommendations on those issues, number 1, and number 2, beyond those issues? Is everything really on the table for the task force, or are you going to be narrowing down, putting it on the page?
I'm going to work very hard at narrowing it down, but if you read the 6 issues, there's a lot of ambiguity and generalities. So I think there's a person who wanted to remain nameless. His name is David Ward, who renamed our task force Noah's Ark Committee because you have at least 2 of everything. So it's going to be hard to rein that in to a great degree. And if you read the 6 charges, they're general enough that it'll be hard to stop anybody from wanting to do anything or put anything on the table to discuss. I think it's my job to try and keep it focused as best I can. And I'd ask the other 2 regents if they'd like to make any other
Mark
comments.
or Tim, anything you want to add?
I'll comment. I think that it's difficult to answer the 6 questions without getting into a lot of other issues. When we talk about the context of those 6 charges, one of them is clearly about strategy and how a system moves forward. The others are more about micromanaging an institution. I'll say for the record that this is my opinion, not that of any board that I serve on, but my feeling is that we need to stay at that strategy level and not micromanage. I think that there are other individuals in the state, even other institutions, that are putting questions on the table that impact this discussion if we talk about the discussion in terms of strategy. I'm not aware that the state has an overall strategy to higher education. My personal belief is that's something that's needed. Is it in the context of this charge? Probably not, but certainly related. So I think Mike's got a big challenge in front of him, and I think that became clear in the discussion because there is a tendency to to pull back and try to move in the direction of that larger discussion. I think that's a discussion that's important. Whether it's done within this task force charge, I guess that's Mike's call. It's probably difficult to go down that road in the time frame that's allowed. But I think it is a discussion that has to be held, and I think it's something that more parties need to be at the table to talk about.
I wanted to mention too, and if they want to give some input, I think it'd be great. Chancellors Cross, Shield, and Wells are on the task force, along with Daryl Bazell from UW-Madison.
Okay. Tim, anything you had? Or?
I think Mark covered what I would have said very well.
All right. Anybody, chancellors who are on the committee here? Chancellor Wells, you've been so quiet the last few days. I've been worried about you. So, yeah.
You'd be happy to know that you would have been proud of him at the meeting.
I've been trying to discipline myself in respect to Chancellor Ward. To the relief of all of you, there's only one of me on Noah's Ark. All I would add is that I think it was really an excellent first meeting, and I think that we got a pretty good consensus that we want to frame the charge that we're given, the 6-part charge, within terms of the so-called what. And the what is needed for the present and the future for the citizens of the state of Wisconsin from our higher educational institutions. And the way we would describe the what is, how we're meeting the knowledge needs of individuals and groups in our communities and detailed within our growth agenda. So I think this is going to be a good opportunity when Kevin comes for us to have that discussion. Is this generally the right what? So then we can get to some of the, because it really is a how charge. Actually, the word how is used in it, I think, out of 4 out of the 6 charges. And there's some, there's some bigger issues in there in terms of structure and tuition policy, and then some more, micro kind of issues that I agree that we have to address and talk about. But if we, frame the charge within the what, then we'll be able to get to the hows as the legislators have asked us to in a thoughtful way. So that's what I want to share.
Sure. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, we have no shortage, it seems, of conversations these days about change in structure. As President Spector reiterated yesterday, earlier in the fall, he called for 2 committees to be formed to provide a more in-depth examination of the responsibilities of the regents and the structures of university governing boards. Yesterday, we heard from Regent Bradley regarding one of those committees addressing the responsibilities of the board and how we might best fulfill those responsibilities in the future. And today, we will have an interim report from the other committee, which is charged with reviewing selected university board structures from around the country to assess the particular strengths and weaknesses of those structures. As chair of that working group, I'll give you hopefully what would be a brief overview of some of our work so far. First, again, the charge of that committee. The Regent Ad Hoc Work Group on UW Structure and Governance was originally created to explore and to do background research on one of the 6 topics assigned to the Legislative Task Force, whether there's a need to restructure the UW system. President Spector asked the same group to consider and respond to President Riley's recommendation that a conversation occur on the benefits and drawbacks of establishing institution-level boards. Our group includes Regents Judy Crane, Chuck Pruitt, and Mike Spector, Chancellors Brian Levin-Stakevich, Mike Lovell, and Brooke Wells, and Andy Richards from President Riley's office. We had an initial phone meeting in November. We're going to have a second meeting on December 20th. The discussion at the first meeting covered a number of topics, including how the goals of one statewide system of public higher education have changed since the merger, the extent to which the current system structure is effective for meeting the needs of UW institutions, current board policy on boards of visitors, and the extent to which UW chancellors rely upon boards of visitors and other types of advisory boards, governance and structures of other public university systems in the United States, and the advantages and disadvantages of various governance structures. I smile because we did all that in an hour and a half, and at least started the conversation with some great background work from Jane and Jess. We agreed, and this is important, I think, to the question of both of Mike and Jeff, and some of the questions about the task force, that we eventually would plan to develop recommendations, specific recommendations, which we would submit to President Spector, but they would also, I'm sure, end up being part of the discussion on the task force. We are sensitive, obviously, to the need to consider our charge in light of the work of the Legislative Task Force. Our group's consideration of the aspects of system structure and governance, such as effectiveness and structure of Chancellor's advisory boards, ultimately, we hope, would provide some useful information to the task force. That's where that committee is at, and if you have any questions on that for any of us who are here today. Okay. Now I'll call upon President Riley for his report to the board. Okay.
Thank you. Vice President Smith, good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. I thought I might start this morning by noting the shootings at Virginia Tech yesterday. Our hearts go out to President Steger and the rest of his colleagues there with having to face this again after the horrible tragedy of a couple of years ago. I talked with Vice President Smith last evening, and we thought it might be timely if we asked Chief Sue Reisling of the UW-Madison Police Force to come in and talk just briefly with the board this morning about the work she and her colleague, police chiefs around the system, have been doing to help ensure security and safety, to be sure that we respond appropriately if incidents occur. I want our students and families to be assured that we're doing everything we possibly can to keep our campuses safe and secure places for the students to study and for the families to send their children. Sue was good enough right after the Virginia Tech tragedy of a couple of years ago to chair a group we put together to look at how we might, what we might learn from the Virginia Tech shootings back then, and how we might make our own efforts at prevention and reaction more effective. So she's graciously agreed to come today and give you a little summary of the work that has gone on as a result of that task force she chaired between then and now. So I'll turn it over to Chief Reisling.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good morning, everyone. You might recall that in April 16th of 2007, Virginia Tech had to date, the United States' worst mass casualty shooting on their campus, in which 32 people were murdered, and the gunman turned the gun on himself, and then he also wounded 25 other people. We formed a committee back then, task force. All 13 campuses were represented. The colleges and extension were also represented. The Regents were represented by Regent Bartel. And we went into overdrive, and within about 4 weeks produced a report for the system that was given to you in July of 2007. It had 17 recommendations in it, everything from administrative changes, communication changes, training changes, etc. The 17 recommendations kind of focused on some major areas. One was awareness, that folks needed to be aware of the characteristics of people who are Avenger shooters and how they go about reporting what they think they see. And we had a very broad awareness campaign on every campus to date, and that has gone very, very well in the 4 years that have passed. The second thing was counseling. The fact that if we're going to prevent this, we need to have early warning, early detection kind of capabilities. And one of the ways that that happens on campuses is that some of these troubled individuals show up at the counseling center. And at that time, we were struggling, all of the campuses were struggling with the lack of resources toward counseling. Many of the campuses have made strides in the intervening years to boost their counseling services. However, the struggle, as you well know, and continue to debate and to try to lead us through, are all of the budget cuts and how they affect the campuses. Oftentimes, they come out of the administrative arm of the campus, which sometimes the counseling centers are seen as a part of. And I know that many of the chancellors have tried everything they can to preserve the core student functions, counseling, police, safety issues on their campuses, because they know how important this is. But I think largely it continues to be a struggle. We did a tremendous amount of training for all of the university police officers throughout the system in rapid deployment, which is the law enforcement response to a shooting tragedy, is a very rapid deployment. Years ago, we used to set up perimeters and we used to kind of wait the bad guys out. Today, the bad guys come with such of an arsenal that you can't wait. The ability to put a tremendous amount of ammunition and bullets on target is so quick today with semi-automatic weapons that the police can't form a perimeter and wait. We have to rapidly deploy and engage the suspect as quickly as possible. So all of the university police officers have been trained now in that method. Part of our recommendation is that each campus make a continuity of operation plan. I'm happy to say that in the intervening years, all but a small number of campuses have complete continuity of operation plans. I think the campuses who don't, again, it's a resource issue. Can you put your resources into something that might happen versus putting your resources into everyday business, which we're all struggling with? We all have campus crisis plans. All of the 13 campuses and the colleges have, and the 13 colleges all have campus crisis plans. Many of them have been tested. What we all find in testing is that, again, the amount of resources you can bring to a situation never match the situation. I mean, they really don't. You can always use more in a crisis. There's always 10 more things that you would like to do or want to do that you just can't do because the people just aren't available. It isn't from a lack of trying, it isn't from a lack of planning. It's just that you get overwhelmed. That's what a nature of a crisis is. We can't staff at the crisis level all the time. That would make us so flush that in the downtimes we'd be twiddling our thumbs, and anyone who works anywhere in the system isn't twiddling their thumbs these days. We all know that everyone is stretched. So communication and how we communicate in a crisis seems to be almost as important as whether or not people get hurt. It seems like if you don't pay a tremendous amount of attention to communicating what you're doing, people will criticize you. And the irony was that yesterday, Virginia Tech was in Washington, D.C., defending itself against the $55,000 fine they received from the Department of Education for not putting out the warnings quickly enough back in 2007. Yesterday, they were able to put their first warning out in under 6 minutes, which is truly remarkable. Most of our campuses have the capability to message out quickly, either through email, text messaging, Twitter, Facebook, all the latest social technology. Most of our campuses have that ability to do. Whether or not they could actually do it when under stress is always an interesting thing, because usually it's assigned to somebody who is being inundated with either phone calls or inundated with the response itself. But most of the campuses have done away with any kind of administrative overview of that emergency messaging, which is really key. We can't have that emergency message have to pass through a series of reviews before it goes, or it won't go. So at Virginia Tech, they have police dispatchers who have the ability to literally push a button and send out an emergency message. And they were able to do that and get it out, and the first message hit in 6 minutes. That doesn't mean that's when they hit the button. One of the things we know at UW-Madison is when we hit the button, we're hitting the button to 77,000 people. And that overwhelms the cells, and it overwhelms the email system. And what we have learned is that when we push out an emergency email, as an example, over about 90% of our emails are out and in people's in baskets in under 10 minutes, and that's 77,000 that we push out. That's really great, because when we started this thing in 2005, it took 2 hours for the email to hit the in baskets. So we've made great strides. Now, our text messaging works much faster because we only have 23,000 people hooked up for our text messaging, because that's an opt-in strategy. You have to want to get our text messages. And we know that our text messages go out in usually under 5 to 6, 7 minutes, similar to the Virginia Tech system. Now, where that resides in the University of Wisconsin is not the dispatch center. And the reason for that is we believe that at the time of a shooting, the dispatch center is going to be overwhelmed with people dialing 911 and wanting to tell the police that there's been a shooting. So we have a command system that clicks into place very quickly, and the message actually goes out from a command member. And any of us can do that actually from anywhere in the country, because we can hook up through the internet. So our system works that way. Each campus has a different system and a different method. I think the key important thing is that most of the campuses have a method, and I think that's really important to understand. How quickly they can use that method is one issue, and then how quickly that method works is another issue. But suffice it to say, none of us are in the 2-hour mode anymore, which is a good thing. The students will help you because they will tweet quicker than quick. I learned working at the Capitol how quickly a crowd of 80,000 can tweet each other and let everybody know what's going on. So the students will help you here. The nice thing about it is that they get on it and go quickly. It's only 140 characters, so it moves pretty quickly. The downside is they also tweet false information. So that's still a struggle for us. Where we focus the majority of our resources and the majority of our time throughout the university system is on prevention. It's on early warning, identifying those student, staff, faculty, or visitors who have some type of issue that they're struggling with that may lead to violence. It's having review teams in place, which all of the campuses do, and the colleges have a more centralized system, but it seems to be working very well. We work very closely with Steve Wildeck of the colleges. We're actually on contract with the colleges, so UW-Madison will help them with some of their threat analysis when they need it. And all of the campuses communicate. The police chiefs meet once a month via conference call and talk over any issues that we might have. And in between, obviously, we help each other wherever we can. The key to understanding Virginia Tech of 2007 is the key to prevention. If we can identify folks early on, intervene, and get them some assistance, we can thwart a lot of this. Yesterday's situation at Virginia Tech could happen literally anywhere. This evidently was an individual who was not a student, who took advantage of a police officer who was otherwise detained doing a traffic stop. It was a routine traffic stop. The officer was back in his vehicle, whether he was writing a ticket or whether he was calling in information, too early to know. The individual walked up and essentially at point-blank range pulled the trigger and executed this police officer. It had nothing to do with the traffic stop as far as indications go. Was not a student. backpack was found that is believed to be the shooter's backpack, in which a change of clothes was there. So he changed clothes out of the clothes he was wearing when he executed the police officer, changed into different clothes, and that must have been part of his escape psychology. I'm speculating there, but that must have been what he was thinking. It's believed now that he actually took his own life in that second parking lot. And so we go forward. Shooting and killing a distracted police officer or a police officer engaged in other work is unfortunately becoming too common in the United States. Police officer deaths in 2011 are up substantially from 2010. It's this execution-style shooting that police are dealing with all over the country. You may recall in Washington State, 4 police officers who were gathered eating breakfast at a local diner were executed. This is becoming more common in American policing, and it's something that we are attempting to train through. The struggle is always that, especially on campus, we want the campus police to be open and available, and when someone approaches them, not to immediately think that they have ill intent, right? We want to give our students directions, our visitors directions. We want to be helpful to parents or whatever. But yet, at the same time, these execution styles make police uncomfortable when people just walk up to them and approach them. It's a balancing act that we struggle with and police struggle with across America more and more. So I don't believe that, at this point, the preliminary information, I don't believe that this shooting was meant to be a mass casualty shooting, or that this individual was known ahead of time to the campus. We'll see as days go on. This sounds much more like somebody who wanted to kill a police officer and, for whatever reason, chose Officer Krause, who's 39 years old and the father of 5. Who knows why that happened? We won't know for a while. But it's not quite at all what we saw in 2007, which was a very premeditated, very thoughtful, what we would call avenger violence, that Cho in 2007 wanted to avenge something. This individual, we don't know his motivation yet. Clearly the death toll is far different, but no less tragic. I'd be happy to answer questions, Mr. President, if anyone has anyone particular.
Thank you very much, Stu, and thank you and your colleagues for all the work you've done on these issues in the last couple of years. I think we have made great progress, and we still have some work to do. But let me ask if Regents have questions. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to begin the regular portion of our morning with a brief update about the proposed budget lapse. You'll recall that we were notified on October 14th by the Department of Administration that the state would need to implement a $174.3 million lapse, which had been authorized in the 2011-13 state budget. The lapse is a tool that allows the state to withdraw a portion of taxpayer funding already allocated to state agencies or to the UW. Given the lingering effects of this persistent economic downturn that we're in, it was not a surprise that the state might have to use this budget balancing tool. We were, however, surprised to see that UW institutions were being asked to absorb 38% of the lapse, although we are only 7% of the GPR budget. These lapses amount to a loss of $65.6 million over 2 years, on top of the $250 million in cuts already imposed on the UW system in the biennial budget. We're working hard to shine a spotlight on this important public policy discussion. On October 27th, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel published an editorial co-signed by all 14 of the chancellors, all 13 of the UW college's deans, and me about the disproportionate allocation of these new cuts. In that editorial, we promised to engage in civil and constructive dialogue that might help us arrive at a more proportional lapse. On November 15th, the Senate's Higher Education Committee, chaired by Senator Dale Schultz, invited UW leaders from across the state to testify at an informational hearing about the challenges facing the university and how best to move the Wisconsin idea forward. Our goal was to present a compelling and comprehensive story, and I think we did that. I want to thank the UW chancellors and the faculty members, students, and business leaders who joined us in that presentation. In particular, prominent business people have stepped forward to assert that cutting the UW so disproportionately is bad for business in Wisconsin. Julia Taylor, president of the Greater Milwaukee Committee, Craig Culver, founder of Culver's Restaurants, and Jim Schneller, president of Vista in Platteville, stated their support for reconsidering the inequitable cuts to the UW system. More than a dozen editorials and op-eds in newspapers around the state have championed that position. Throughout this time, we've been in regular contact with the Department of Administration. I'm pleased to report I've had several conversations about this directly with the Secretary of DOA, Mike Hipsch. As of today, those lines of communication remain open, and I remain hopeful that DOA will reconsider UW's share of the new budget lapses. So I look forward to reporting to you about the fruits of those conversations later. In the end, our chancellors are more familiar than anybody else with the impact of these proposed cuts to their students, to their families, and to their local communities. So let me turn to just a couple of chancellors for them to briefly share their thoughts about the impacts at their institutions. I've asked Chancellor Lovell, Chancellor Ford, and Chancellor Levin-Stankiewicz to say a word or two. So let me start with Chancellor Lovell. Mike.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And I'm just going to give a brief highlight of some of the things that I mentioned when we got to testify. I brought three specific examples of things that I thought everyone should be concerned about in terms of the budget lapses and the impacts it was going to make on our campus. The first one had to do with the fact that we really are worried about the impacts on the faculty and staff on our campuses. And, you know, climate and morale is already poor, and these lapses are continuing to make things harder. And I went and looked, before I testified, I went and looked to see, you know, I had heard some cases where people were leaving, going for greener pastures, because as we all know, our faculty and staff are underpaid. You know, on our campus, they were benchmarked between 19 and 29% below their peers in terms of in different disciplines. And so these lapses, obviously, we're going to continue to ask them to do more with less. And when I went and looked at how many people had left this year to other universities were being recruited away, it was 41 of our faculty and staff had been recruited away, which was very concerning to me. The number was much greater than I expected. And you have to understand, these are the top performers on our campuses. They're being poached away to other universities from other parts of the country. And I gave a story about it. One of our top faculty members was just recently recruited away to Northwestern. I believe he had 3 NIH R01 grants and won the Shaw Award and other things. And these are real concerns that we have, that our top people are being taken from us because of the cuts that are going on our campuses and how we are asking people to continue to do more, and with not giving them any salary increases or any sign that we have things are going to get better for them. And the second case I brought up was how the lapse would affect our teaching. And I've taken in a traditional way the current lapse on our campus. When it trickles down to the units, our Letters and Science Department, for example, would have to absorb about $2.5 million cut. And the Dean of the College of Letters and Science informed us that if he had to take that cut, that he would have to lay off more than 100 lecturers in the College of Letters and Sciences. And to put that into perspective, is that most lecturers within the college would teach 2 sections on the average of 30 students per section, and the math works out that there would be about 6,000 students in the College of Letters and Sciences that would be looking to try to get into courses that would no longer be there. It's already a problem on our campus that we do not, we have trouble having enough sections for our students to take the classes they need to graduate. I hear that from students all the time. This would really exacerbate that problem for the students. And again, this is 6,000 students is just in one college. You know, we have 10 or 11 other colleges and units on our campus that would be affected as well. So I believe that these cuts would impact the ability for all our students on our campus to get into the courses that they want to. The third point, the 5th point that I raised, was the fact that we've had millions of dollars in investment this year from regional industry to our campuses. We've had endowed chairs from Rockwell and Johnson Controls. We have had millions of dollars in new labs that corporations have invested in our campuses. And the reason why companies are doing this is they're looking at investing in their future by investing in us. They want us to be able to train their students in specific areas of technologies. And I raised the fact that I'm very concerned with the current lapses as they invest, particularly in the new facilities. Our campuses, that we're no longer going to be able to man those facilities. We're not going to be able to hire technicians to work in the facilities. Rockwell has funded a new center for supply chain management. I'm worried about being able to hire a director for that center. And I'm just really concerned that we're not going to be able to fulfill our end of the bargain. But as investments are being made and making sure we're training and developing technology in areas where these companies are investing in us. And I really think that we should all be concerned that we need, as institutions, to make sure we have our faculty and staff. They're really, if you think about what our competitive advantages as campuses, or the people on our campuses, and we really have great people, but we're losing them. If we lose the top 5%, this year, the next year, the following year, we're going to be at a real disadvantage. We need to make sure that we are providing courses for our students that they can take so that they're graduating in a timely manner. We owe that to both the students and their families in the state of Wisconsin. Finally, we need to make sure that we are providing the resources to make sure the investments are being made in us, and really there are millions of dollars investments to fulfill our ends, that we're training, developing technology for the companies that are investing in us.
Thanks, Mike. Chancellor Ford?
Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to say a few words about how the budget lapse situation is impacting the University of Wisconsin-Parkside. And at UW-Parkside, we are certainly taking this very seriously and understand the new normal that we are in higher education. And I share many of the same concerns that Chancellor Lovell has at UW-Milwaukee. But I'd like to add two other dimensions to the discussion. And the first is the implication of the continued budget lapse and the uncertainty around funding and how it impacts our ability to be strategic and entrepreneurial. We are in the second year of our strategic plan, and we had worked through the budget reduction that we received, and then had to make had the challenges facing us with the budget lapse. We were in the process of providing some strategic initiatives and some dollars to enhance technology on our campus, and the technology was going to be used to enhance the learning environment and the quality of the experience for our students, and also help us with some administrative efficiencies. And so we've had to slow down as we look at how will we take these additional reductions in an already tight budget. The other thing I think about, and I share with my campus, is the decisions we make today not only impact the quality of the student experience and the delivery of our mission right now, but really have longer-term impacts. And that also concerns me. The second aspect is not only in terms of being able to retain our quality faculty and staff and those that are working very hard, but it's also, as we are attracting folks to the state of Wisconsin, the first question they ask is about the stability of funding and the support for public higher education. We tell them where we are, we tell them we're working together, we talk about our quality, but it's uncertain today where we're going. I have a few notes I want to make sure I get to. The other part that I think it's important to share is that in these uncertain times in terms of funding and continuous changes, we continue to be very good stewards of the resources that we have, and that our most important focus is on the delivery of our mission and the continued service to the students we serve. So, thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Brian?
Thank you, Kevin. We put a lot of work into, I'm going to be somewhat repetitive, we put a lot of work into the recruitment of faculty at UW-Eau Claire because we need faculty who are certainly at the top of their fields and conducting research and staying current in their discipline. But more importantly, we need folks who are really dedicated to teaching and really focus on the undergraduate student and on the undergraduate experience. And the last few years, I've heard my colleagues, primarily from Madison and Milwaukee talked about the effect of budget reductions on faculty retention. And I've had to stay fairly quiet because we didn't really lose that many faculty to competitors or competitive offers. We've developed over the years a pretty strong culture at the university, and I think the selectivity of the right kind of people that come into the university feeds into that culture. And so we weren't having those experiences. This is a whole different ballgame this year. The third year in a row of salary reductions for faculty and staff has led to what for us is significant losses in faculty, primarily from among those folks who have just gained tenure and who are really at the top of their game in terms of their ability to contribute new ideas to the curriculum, new programs to the university, and really inspire students. They're not quite the university citizens our senior faculty become, but they're getting there. And so those losses are particularly tough because we've invested so much in them already to this point, and they have in us. People going not only to other universities, but largely to the private sector where they have that opportunity in fields like science. We've lost 5 nurses in the nursing faculty. One in mid-semester said, enough, I got a better offer, I'm leaving. And that is now going to have a programmatic impact because we have now had to defer the incoming class in our next accelerated nursing program, probably for up to a year, until we replenish or replace those faculty if we can. So this is really disconcerting to us because it's having an effect on the core culture of the institution, on which is really our stock and trade at UW-Eau Claire. It's what we build our reputation on. Second, I'm a proud member of the professor in the Regent Award-winning history department at UW-Eau Claire. And a couple of days ago, my chair sent out a message. I'm constructing the fall schedule. And so I normally teach a course in the fall. And I wrote her back saying, I'll teach that course, or if you need me to do something else, I'll do that. And she sent a note back about, well, it's going to be some time before I can make that decision because of all the uncertainties. I don't know how many instructional academic staff we'll be able to hire. I don't know what's happening with rehired annuitants on who we rely for many courses. We have a lot of shared faculty across disciplines within any university, faculty who teach in Latin American studies and history, faculty who teach in 2 or 3 disciplines. And as we don't replace positions in one of those disciplines, their chairs are saying, you have to stay in your discipline. You can't go over to that other area and help them out. So it becomes a domino effect across the institution. She doesn't know whether additional people will retire unexpectedly or on short notice. And of course, we have non-replacements in our department as well. But the key issue for her is that in the past, because of our culture, faculty have generally stepped up to do whatever's necessary for the department to meet its needs. And I think the external forces that have affected our culture now raise questions about whether there is a willingness on the part of everybody to do that, or whether they are going to engage in the kinds of extra efforts that we've really come to rely on them providing to us over the years. Other areas that we're currently engaged in is we're looking at a number of areas. Among them are health services. And we've just put out a request for information to look at whether all or part of that should be provided by non-university personnel or non-university entities. We have a large health community, and so that came out of a study we did a couple of years ago, but it's given additional urgency right now as we look at ways to prevent ourselves from having to raise the fees on students. Those are program revenue fees, but still they're costs students have to pay, and ways that we can reduce our non-academic costs so that we can continue to put the quality faculty in the classroom where the students need them.
Thanks, Brian. Well, as you can see, we have some real challenges we're facing that have real impacts on our students and on our partnerships with business and industry across the state. We'll continue the dialogue with the state about this. We'll continue to have our local business and other local leaders involved in those conversations, and I'll keep you informed about how they're going. Any questions?
Kevin, what is the timing on when a decision might be made and whether the lapse would be reconsidered?
That's not entirely clear. Each of the state agencies and we were asked to provide a report to the Department of Administration on how we would take the lapse number that we had, and our initial one was 65.5 million, as I said. In conversations with the Secretary of the Department of Administration, we've agreed that as he considered our request, that we did not need to submit that report yet. It was due at an earlier date, but he and I agreed as we were having these, I hope, fruitful conversations that we'd hold off on submitting that report. So it's not entirely clear when that report now will be given in. We'll give it to them when they want it.
Any other questions, comments? Tim?
First, I want to say, for being a newbie, I think the reports of the chancellors about the specifics of the damage, the hurt that the lapses are going to put on the UW system are very useful, and I really appreciate that because it helps to bring it home. And I'm happy to hear that there's some discussion going on with DOA about this. Now, I understand, and this is where tell me if I'm off base here, as I understand it, the lapses fell disproportionately on the UW system and actually a certain part of state operations because the governor and administration decided to exempt certain types of things like human services and K-12 education from their proportionate share of the lapses. And so obviously somebody made value judgments about the impact of those things on the state of Wisconsin. And I just wanted a little clarification. In these discussions with DOA is the university, which has a wealth of research and knowledge and statistics, offering alternatives, saying, okay, this is where you may have made a mistake about the level of impact that the cuts on Badger Care might have on the state as opposed to the cuts in the university. In other words, as a management tool, coming to management with a solution to a problem is always better than just saying, hey, it hurts. And so I'm just wondering if we're following that method.
Well, what we've done really is to try to give them information on how disproportionate this is, how we came to the conclusion that it's disproportionate at the level that it is, and say that if the state long term is going to be prosperous and have enough revenue to operate so we don't just continue to cut services, we need to have the university be a priority so we can get more people educated, so we can have the kind of partnerships with business and industry that create new jobs. So we've really focused on making our case about the value. We typically, Regent Higgins, don't say to state government, well, you ought to cut K-12 instead of us, or you ought to cut Badger Care more. We don't think that should be our role. We think your role is to advocate for the value of the university to the state, and it's for elected officials then to make their judgments about priorities among those values. And I think that's probably a more appropriate way to operate. And so in that sense, we don't go in with a solution in the way that you might like us to do, because that really would involve pointing the finger at other places. And let me say, in these conversations, we have recognized how hard these choices are and how rough the economy is. And when we took the original $250 million cut, which is tied for the largest cut in UW history, we didn't complain at all. Not at all. And we've said that to DOA. Now we think this disproportionality of the lapse on top of that is something we do need to speak up about.
Tony?
And I know this isn't necessarily the forum, but I'll just point out the disproportionate amount of cuts K through 12 did in the original budget. And it was far more, a greater proportion of our budget than the university.
Further questions, comments?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
An update on voter ID, which I know you're all interested in. I want to give you a quick summary of our work to comply fully with the new Wisconsin voter ID law. I'm sure that we all believe that civic participation should be an integral part of the college experience. So all of our colleges and universities have been working diligently to ensure that eligible voters who are UW students will have the information and resources they need to exercise their most precious right as citizens in a democracy. As of today, 10 of our campuses have submitted to the Government Accountability Board and had approved versions of new student ID cards that fully comply with the voter ID requirements. We expect the design submitted by the remaining campuses to the Government Accountability Board to be approved shortly. So I think the bottom line is that this board, the system administration, the chancellors and other institutional leaders have all worked, I characterize it as hard, fast, and smart to ensure that our students will comply with the new voter ID law and therefore be able to participate in upcoming elections. Some other legislative updates. It's been a busy time generally with the legislature and the UW. In early November, the Assembly Committee on Colleges and Universities met jointly with their Senate counterpart committee for an informational presentation about aligning education, workforce, and economic development policy. I was pleased to testify about some of our efforts to align education with the state's workforce needs and economic development efforts, and highlighted by some very good examples from our institutions. Over the past few months, many other legislative meetings, both formal and informal, have taken place with senators and representatives from both sides of the aisle. We've also had several meetings with the DOA Secretary, as I mentioned. At various times, Regent President Spector and other members of this board, as well as chancellors and representatives of the UW system, have all been involved. The bottom line is we have many shared challenges we recognize in a really tough economy, and I fully expect that such conversations will continue in a cooperative spirit to figure out how best to meet those challenges. Some news from around the system, starting right here with our host campus, UW-Madison. They can be very proud that one of their own, senior Alexis Brown, has become one of an elite group of American students to be awarded a 2012 Rhodes Scholarship, one of the most coveted honors in the world of higher education. Alexis is an English major from Algonquin, Illinois. She'll be invited to spend 2 to 3 years of study at Oxford University. The scholarship, valued at approximately $50,000 a year, is the oldest international study program in the world. With the scholarship, Alexis hopes to further her studies in English literature, an effort which I heartily endorse. So, Alexis, if you're listening, there may be a university presidency in your future. Congratulations to David Ward and his colleagues at UW-Madison on that award of the Rhodes Scholarship. UW-La Crosse history professor Greg Wegner has been named the 2011 Wisconsin Professor of the Year. He was selected for the award by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. Dr. Wegner, who is also an alumnus of UWL, has been teaching there since 1989. His area of expertise is the Holocaust, which he has studied for more than 40 years. Dr. Wegner also coordinates Western Wisconsin's National History Day contest, which involves more than 1,300 middle school and high school students each year. He says he never gets bored with his career because his work is filled with pondering core questions relating to what it means to be human, the relationship between the individual and the state, and the terrible persistence of genocide and mass murder. I have to think like a student and be hungry for knowledge, he says. I don't have all the answers. It's the questions that should drive good teaching. So congratulations to Dr. Wegner, to Chancellor Joe Gao, and UW-La Crosse. UW-Oshkosh's Integrated Marketing and Communications team was recently awarded the first ever American Marketing Association Higher Education Team Award for its leadership and achievements in higher education marketing. The team works to maintain the integrity of the UW-Oshkosh brand through a marketing strategy that links the university's mission and vision and priorities for its various audiences. The American Marketing Association received more than 80 nominations for the Individual and Team Higher Education Marketer of the Year awards. So congratulations to Chancellor Rick Wells, the team, and the UW-Oshkosh campus community on that. For the past year, UW-Stout has made efforts to increase the number of racial and ethnic minorities staying at the school. The State Council on Affirmative Action and the Office of State Employment Relations acknowledged these efforts recently by presenting UW-Stout with a Program Achievement Diversity Award. The award specifically recognizes Stout for its summer bridge and pre-college programs, which help students make the transition to college, as well as the Math Teaching and Learning Center. Julie Firstbow, who's here with us today representing Stout, the Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, also notes that the award recognizes UW-Stout's work to close the achievement gap. And she's happy to report that the retention rate for minority students at the university is now the same as for other students. So congratulations to her and to Chancellor Chuck Sorensen and your colleagues. UW River Falls has received a $134,000 Susan Harward training grant from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration to establish the Center for Dairy Farm Safety. That center will be developed and managed in collaboration with UW Extension, with the goal of bringing together best practice protocols for dairy operation, occupational safety, and health programs. This grant strengthens the capacity of both UW institutions to develop new curriculum designed with dairy industry involvement, to extend outreach capabilities to dairy producers, and to provide training to future producers and managers by incorporating the curriculum into secondary education courses. So congratulations to Chancellor Van Galen and Chancellor Ray Cross and their respective institutions. As this board heard at our October meeting in Green Bay, facilitating transfers is something that the UW system is focused on, and so is the task force, as a matter of fact. As part of that focus, UW-Eau Claire is currently piloting a program to ease the transition process and success rate among students who transfer to UW-Eau Claire from Chippewa Valley Technical College, the largest source of UW-Eau Claire's transfer students. The Transitions Program, which is funded through the UW System's Growth Agenda Grant Program, is designed to assist students from the Tech College both before and after they enroll at UW-Eau Claire. Program leaders say the objective is not only to improve the retention and graduation rates among all students who transfer from CVTC to Eau Claire, but also to increase the number of multicultural students who transfer. Both objectives very much in line with our growth agenda goals. So hats off to Chancellor Levin Stankiewicz and the UW-Eau Claire campus for that. We also often talk about the value of building relationships between the university and local businesses. A new venture at UW Parkside is a great example of this concept in action. A startup mechanical engineering firm called ProCubed has moved into temporary quarters at the university's Solutions for Economic Growth Center, where plans are being developed to build a better wheelchair drive system. Student teams will get hands-on experience as they work with ProCubed on engineering, business management, and successful marketing of this product. As Chancellor Debbie Ford has put it, this is going to be a unique experience for our students. When ProCubed is successful, it means jobs for students and many other people in the area. So ProCubed will move into its long-term R&D facilities in Molinaro Hall on the Parkside campus this spring. Congratulations to Chancellor Ford and the Parkside campus community on that partnership. I'd also like to call your attention to the UW System Administration Staff Awards that were presented last month. These awards are opportunities to recognize some exceptional colleagues in the system administration who have really made a difference in all sorts of ways. It's our chance to share some well-deserved pats on the back for those staff who, in system administration, have not had the easiest year in the world. So I thought you might be interested, and I think we might have the programs in your packets, but if not, we can get them. You do, very good. Regents, these folks are really your staff people who work hard to make you and me, for that matter, and the chancellors and everybody else, for that matter, look good. So congratulations to our award winners in system administration. Finally, I know we all wish the best of luck to the Badgers in the Rose Bowl again, and to the UW Whitewater Warhawks in the Amos Alonzo Stagg Bowl again. Chancellors Ward and Telfer Not yet. You have one more game? Okay. Well, we know you're going to win that one. We know you're going to win that one. Dick and David have very enviable records in winning in bowl games, so I wanted to remind them that unlike in freshman English, repetition in this case is not a bad thing. So that's my concludes my report. But I thought I might read a little poem, a seasonal poem.
I'm surprised that you would.
And this poem is by Alfred Tennyson. I won't read the whole thing, an excerpt from it. But I thought it kind of captures the mood in Wisconsin and the mood around the country at the end of what's been a tough year in this country, and hopefully looks forward in a positive way to the year to come. It's called Ring Out Wild Bells. Ring out wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out wild bells and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind for those that here we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. So peace to all of you and your families in this season. I turn it back over to you, Vice President Smith.
Who is the poet?
Alfred Tennyson.
Jerry, Gary, and Tim, you'll get to know this is one of our regular parts of our. We don't look at these polls beforehand. We don't know what's going to come, but it's a regular thing we look forward to. Thinking about our new regents, we want to congratulate you on your appearance yesterday at the confirmation hearings. We heard directly from Senator Schultz last night at the reception that he thought things went very well, and you will have probably some very good news coming soon. So congratulations on that. I'll call on Jeff to give the report of the Capital Planning and Budget Committee.
Thank you, Vice President Smith. I'm going to ring in the report of the Capital Planning and Budget Committee.
It's a theme. There's a theme.
Joining me yesterday for the meeting were Regents Pointer and Manydeeds and Spector, and we had new Regents Whitburn and Higgins with us as well. We met in the beautiful Wisconsin Idea Room, which is down the hall here, with a full wall of windows overlooking the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery, and we paused for a moment at the beginning to think of and honor our previous chairman, Jesus Salas, who continually complained that this committee was put in closets for meetings. We had a beautiful view of the WID. We addressed the following 9 resolutions, which were unanimously approved by the committee and are now presented as consent agenda items. Resolution 1.3.D, which was brought by UW-Eau Claire, requests authority to modify its campus boundary. The campus recently completed a facilities master plan, which recommends the expansion of the campus boundary south to include future addition of state office building and land, which is adjacent to the upper campus when that property becomes available. It will give the campus an opportunity to create a somewhat more prominent front door entrance from one of Eau Claire's most heavily traveled streets, and it should, in the future, provide a great entrance. Resolution 1.3.E requests authority to construct UW-Madison $10 million Carson Gully renovation project. Half of that funding comes from program revenue support borrowing and the other half from program revenue cash. This project will replace all the plumbing, mechanical, and electrical systems in the existing building which, by the way, was constructed in 1926. All interior finishes will be upgraded, and the exterior will be improved with new energy-efficient windows, which are consistent with the historical facade. This project will incorporate sustainable design elements, such as high-efficiency HVAC, stormwater control, indoor air quality management, and construction waste management. These renovations will make the building safer, result in more efficient faculty, and reduce the maintenance costs. And at the end of the consideration of this item, by the way, I looked out at the room of guests, and I asked how many people here know who Carson Gully was. And there was only, I think, probably 5 to 10%. It's been a long time. He's been gone for, I think, 40 years now. But he was at the time, and for much of the period of the 50s and 60s, the premier chef. He was an African-American. He was a premier chef in Madison. And he is the creator of what I treasure, which is the fudge bottom pie of the Union. Resolution 1.3.F requests authority to demolish and remove 5 storefront buildings on University Avenue on the UW-Madison campus in anticipation of construction of the new music performance facility, as was included in the 2005 campus master plan. The programming and conceptual design has been completed for the new facility. Fundraising is in progress, and the land will provide usable open space until the design for the facility is completed. Funds are there, and we're ready for construction. Our last prior action on this, you will recall, Regents, we commenced a proceeding in eminent domain to acquire one of those properties called the Brothers Bar at 704 University Avenue. We had a lot of pushback, you recall, and in fact we were defendants in a lawsuit. That lawsuit was eventually settled. We never completed the eminent domain, and we sold and we purchased the property for more like what it was worth and what they requested. We are now talking with Brothers Bar about how long they can stay there. Their lease ran out, will run out at the end of this year, but we plan to allow them to stay through the first semester, and as they look for another place for their bar. One wonders why they haven't been looking for another place for their bar for the last year and a half, but they will be moving out at the end of May. Resolution 1.3.G, which is also brought by UW-Madison, requests authority to construct $52 million Memorial Union Theater Wing renovation project, Phase 1. This project, which is funded with $40.5 million of program revenue support borrowing and almost $12 million of gift funds, will renovate the theater wing of the Memorial Union. The theater wing, by the way, was built in, I think, 1938 or 39, and is, although it is much revered for its design and functionality, it is really quite dated in a lot of respects. It will also renovate selected spaces in 2 other wings of the building, and the entire 5th floor will be made into offices. The renovations will include upgrades to the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, some of which date back to the time that the building was built in 1928. Combined with improved accessibility to areas of other 2 wings of the building. The building, by the way, is on, I think, 16 different levels if you go all around the building, and that will be improved. In addition to the building, to provide about 2,500 square feet theater lounge at the north end of the current theater is also included. I might add that this was a subject of some contention among students and some faculty. You may have read about it in the paper. There will be a foyer or lounge added on the north side of the theater lobby. Some people felt that it was too large. It impaired the views of the sunset and otherwise changed the atmosphere of the Union Terrace. There was a student referendum by which was held, an advisory referendum held by ASM, the Student Governance Organization, and it was on a very close vote. The noes succeeded. It was almost a statistical even vote. But in any event, the union went back and asked the designers to look at it again and take into consideration the objections that had been raised. And that addition is now considerably smaller than it was before and changed in its configuration a bit to address those objections. So it is with that modification, which comes directly from the student views, that this resolution is put forward. The project will be constructed utilizing sustainable design practices with a goal of becoming LEED certified at least the silver level. Resolution 1.3.H is brought by UW-Madison, requests authority to construct $2.9 million entirely gift-funded Kohl Center South End Club. I don't know how you belong to the South End Club, but I'm sure if you reach back here, you'll find it's at the south end of the Kohl Center main concourse, and it will be a club area for patrons. Project work includes construction to create a club seating space, a buffet and beverage area. Also, the audio-video area will be expanded and remodeled to meet current needs. Resolution 1.3.J requests authority to release building trust funds to continue planning UW River Falls Health and Human Performance Building Project. This project was approved for advanced enumeration, you may recall, in the 2013-15 biennial budget as part of the capital budget. The planning funds will allow for the selection of an architect, engineering team, and to prepare plans and specifications to go out for bids in 2013 July, when the funding becomes available. Resolution 1.3K is brought by UW Superior and requests authority to enter into land lease agreements and to require real property for the long-term operation of the Lake Superior National Estuarine Research Reserve. Funding for this acquisition has been obtained through a federal grant. Reserve works in collaboration with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the university, and other key partners to improve the understanding of Lake Superior freshwater estuaries and coastal resources. And it involves research, education, outreach, and considerable stewardship. Some of you have been to Superior, like UW Superior. You probably know the location of this. It's a sort of a peninsula, and it will include the acquisition of 2 buildings and a dock facility on land that is currently owned by the city of Superior. Resolution 1.3.L requests authority to construct 8 all-agency maintenance and repair projects at 6 institutions, totaling $10.5 million, and these include utility improvements, space remodeling, equipment replacements, and also, by the way, includes shoreline restoration in front of the Memorial Union Terrace, which is falling into the lake, as part of, and it will be part of the Alumni Park next to the Union. Resolution 1.3.M requests approval of the UW System Administration Major Capital Projects Evaluation Criteria, which is the standard for ranking general fund major projects. This is a standard that is updated periodically. The planning cycle for the 2013-15 capital budget has begun, and that process includes approval of criteria used for prioritizing major projects funded by general fund supported borrowing. There are objective and subjective criteria. These have been updated to reflect current system-wide initiatives, priorities, and the goals of the Board of Regents, and these are used to create a priority list of projects that you will hear of in the next cycle. These evaluation criteria have been vetted by the campus planners and chancellors from around the system. These 9 resolutions were passed unanimously by the committee, and I now move adoption of resolutions 1.3 D, E, F, G, H, J, K, L, and M.
Is there a second? Second? Is there a request to move any item from this consent agenda? Further discussion? All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Now, those of you who are following in the materials may have noticed that a resolution that was included in your materials was not presented here. I wanted to address that. Resolution 1.3.I was not acted on by the committee. This is a request by UW-Platteville to enter into a set of agreements with UW-Platteville Real Estate Foundation for the purpose of constructing and operating residence hall and dining facility on that campus on state-owned land. The goal is to construct a residence hall to meet more of the existing and projected demand for on-campus housing by 2013. And these agreements will permit the Real Estate Foundation to construct the building, which will consist of approximately 160,000 square feet at a total estimated cost at this point of $26 million. And it will house approximately 416 students and a dining facility. The foundation will own the facility and be solely responsible for financing the project. The problem that we addressed in the committee and that is not yet resolved is what will these agreements actually look like. There are some legal issues involved in having a private entity construct a facility on state land to be used by our students. And there are some policy issues as to what such things as what will happen to that facility at the end of the term of the agreements, or if for some reason the operation were to fail, who does what, who's responsible for what. There are liability issues, there are management issues. These things have to be resolved consistent with the legal restrictions that exist. The Capital Planning and Budget staff is working with the Department of Administration and the State Building Commission on these issues. We hope to have some resolution of those things within the next 3 or 4 weeks. As you know, we don't have a Regents meeting in January, so it may be necessary in order to keep this project on schedule for the Executive Committee of the Regents to address this resolution. But I wanted the board to be aware of it, and if you look through the materials and if you have any questions or concerns about this particular item, please let us know. So we are not bringing that as a resolution now. The committee also met with the Business Finance and Audit Committee to hear 2 presentations yesterday, as some of you know who were there. The first, very fine presentation by UW-Madison Vice Chancellor Darrell Bazell, describing the university's plan for stewardship of its resources by creating a culture of process improvement through a phased approach. Very interesting presentation. And UW-Eau Claire presented an overview of the university's new master plan, which is the result of 2 years of collaborative planning. It was a very fine presentation, and we were very interested in that. Associate Vice President David Miller reported that the Building Commission last time approved about $130 million of projects for us at its October meeting, and for which we were very grateful and pleased. And finally, the committee recognized that Vice Chancellor of Facilities Ellen Fish, UW-Madison, is leaving the system to take a very fine position at Johns Hopkins University. We will miss his talents and tact, and we have done very well with the help that he's given, and the committee recognized his departure with a round of applause and 3 cigars. And Mr. Vice President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeff. We will turn to the report of the Education Committee. Jose?
Thank you very much. Our committee met, and we met in this room, as a matter of fact. We had an informative, brief but informative agenda, and I will report on that at this moment. The committee heard from Provost Paul DeLuca, and then also from Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning, Aaron Brower, and also Vice Provost for Lifelong Learning and Dean of the Division of Continuing Studies, Jeff Russell. Their report was a continuation of Chancellor Ward's morning presentation on excellence. And they described some of the educational innovations that are being explored and implemented on the Madison campus that seek to unleash the entrepreneurial and creative energies of faculty and staff, and in the process also preserving the quality of student learning, creating efficiencies, and potentially developing new revenue sources. While the innovations that are being sought are based on building on past successes, what really separates this work from previous initiatives is that there are no new or additional resources with which to do this. They're not simply trying to do more with less. They're really trying to do better with less, a very critical distinction. One of the other things that was discussed at the time was, and it's very good that they are already planning this, how are they going to report this out to the community, both the campus community and the external community, so that there is a clear understanding that innovation, seeking the efficiencies and other revenues is clearly happening at the campus. We also then heard from UW-Parkside as part of the overall restructuring, and particularly from Provost Terry Brown, brought to the committee's attention a request to approve the establishment of 3 new colleges as required by system policy. Pending our full board approval this morning, UW-Parkside plans to establish the College of Arts and Humanities, the College of Natural and Health Sciences, and the College of Social Sciences and Professional Studies. This process of implementing these colleges will be phased in between the fall semester of 2012 and fall 2013. Provost Brown explained the reasons behind the reorganization, which seeks to address the unwieldy lopsidedness of Parkside's existing college structure and strengthen the university's academic disciplines through more focused leadership. The proposal does have broad support on campus. It was unanimously approved by faculty governance in October. And the committee itself also was likewise very supportive of the overall reorganization and unanimously approved the resolution to establish the 3 new colleges. I had a visit on campus along with some other Regents as part of our buddy campus structure, and got firsthand to hear and understand, and so we are very supportive, those of us that visited the campus. That resolution is part of the consent agenda that will be moving forward at the end of my report. After this, we then heard from Interim Senior Vice President Mark Nook's report covering a number of updates, all of which describe work that's being done in the academic affairs area to address the recommendations from President Riley's response to the Advisory Committee on the Roles of UW System Administration. These include work to integrate and frame the various initiatives in academic affairs as clear components of the growth agenda. We received a couple of good handouts that really gave us a better understanding of several of these initiatives, and so that in itself, interestingly, was a major help to us. The process is underway for the transfer also of the Institute for Urban Education to one of the UW campuses. An update also was given on changes to the UW System's accountability report as required by Act 32, some of which present significant challenges because no data exists for some of the required indicators. And again, we were given a very useful, informative handout that allows us to monitor how that's going to happen. And then another item that was discussed was the formation of the Program Planning Review Committee, the group that is being charged with revising the system's program planning and review process. Mark also shared some details about how and why the Institute for Urban Education is being transferred to a UW institution or campus. Broad consultation has happened with the provost and education deans about this matter, and there is wide agreement that it is the right path towards at the right time. So a request for proposal process will be unfolded in a few coming weeks, with a decision about this transfer to occur sometime in the spring of 2012. The Institute is a program that is of value to UW institutions and their efforts to prepare educators to teach in urban settings, and the community has followed the Institute's progress with interest over the 4 years since its inception. While the Regents will not need to approve the decision to move the Institute to a particular campus, Mark assured us that he will keep us apprised of the transfer of this program, as well as several others identified in the President's response to the advisory committee. So with that, in addition to the minutes from its October 6, 2011 meeting, the Education Committee unanimously approved 4 resolutions, which I now move for approval by the full board. Resolution 1.1.82, authorizing the implementation of the BSBA in Environmental Science at UW-Whitewater. Resolution 1.1.83, authorizing the implementation of the BA/BS in Computer Science at UW-Whitewater. Resolution 1.1.84, authorizing the implementation of the collaborative online BS in Health Information Management and Technology at UW Green Bay, UW Parkside, and UW Stevens Point. And finally, Resolution 1.1C, authorizing the establishment of 3 new colleges at UW Parkside. Again, the College of Arts and Humanities, the College of Natural and Health Sciences, and the College of Social Sciences and Professional Studies. That is my motion.
Is there a second? Second. Is there a request to remove any of the items? Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
And with that, that concludes the Education Committee report, which adjourned at 3:55.
Very good.
Sure about that.
Question is, when did it start? We'll now turn to the report of the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee. Mike?
We started out with a joint meeting of the Business, Finance, and Audit and the Education Committee to address 3 items. The first item was the 2010 annual report of the Wisconsin Partnership Program. Dean Robert Golden of the UW School of Medicine and Public Health presented the 2010 annual report of the Wisconsin Partnership Program. The annual report details the use of funding awarded to the UW School of Medicine and Public Health when Blue Cross Blue Shield United of Wisconsin was converted to a for-profit stock corporation. It has a remarkable track record. Since its inception in 2004, the program has awarded more than $97 million through 234 initiatives to community-based nonprofit organization, faculty-led education, research and outreach, and government agencies. Moreover, the program has resulted in incredible leveraging of its grants to bring in additional funding from other sources, especially federal, which is becoming even more important. The program made 23 grants in 2010 for projects that advanced population health in Wisconsin, including continued support for the Life Course Initiative for Healthy Families, a major strategic initiative to improve birth outcomes among African Americans in Wisconsin, support for physical activity and obesity prevention in young people, and development of targeted therapies to fight breast cancer. The second item in our joint meeting was Operations Review and Audit, a program review on students with disabilities. Our Director, Elizabeth Dion, discussed highlights of this recently completed program review, The report notes that the institution reviewed were generally meeting the board's policy objectives and offered 5 observations or recommendations which may further enhance efforts in this area. Director Dion from Operations Review and Audit presented highlights of the recently completed program review on students with disabilities. The review was conducted to evaluate compliance with Regent Policy Document 14-10, non-discrimination on the basis of disability, as well as to applicable federal and state regulations. Overall, the analysis found the institution reviewed were meeting the board's policy objectives and in compliance with applicable regulations. The report offered 5 observations with recommendations intended to improve the efficiency of operations, minimize the risk of noncompliance, and ensure the effectiveness of the disability services offered by UW institutions to students. Due to the increased number of students needing the services and the university's goal to produce more degree holders, Regents suggested data be collected to ensure these services are resulting in the success of students with disabilities. Our third item was UW-Milwaukee's contractual agreement with CERNET Education Development Company Limited. Chancellor Lovell explained how the agreement with CERNET fits within UW-Milwaukee's vision to focus on global engagement and will serve to enhance the reputation. The committees were asked to approve the contractual agreement for the recruitment of Chinese students to UW-Milwaukee's intensive English program. UWM has been working on the agreement for more than a year, and financial, legal, academic, and student success considerations were all attended to by Chancellor Lovell and colleagues in the development of this agreement. UWM anticipates that a large number of students will be admitted to and graduate from its degree program after completing the English as a Second Language program. Among the perceived benefits are a more globally engaged university, enhanced students' diversity on campus, and improved non-resident tuition revenue. After a good discussion and assurances about oversight by the Provost's office, the contract was approved unanimously, and that resolution will be part of the consent agenda. We then held a joint meeting of Business, Finance, and Audit with the Capital Planning and Budget Committee. Jeff said a few words about that, so I'll forego that part, except to let you know that with some of the things that UW-Madison is looking at, these pens at your table are one of 250 different pens that are utilized on UW-Madison's campus. So we found one, we were told about one way to start producing some more efficiencies, I should say. When we reconvened at the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee, we heard from Operations Review and Audit Director Dion on 3 topics. Compliance review of the implementation of Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, known as FERPA. Director Dion discussed highlights of the recently completed program review. The review concluded that UW systems institutions are generally meeting FERPA requirements and does offer 8 recommendations which may further enhance the ability of the institutions to effectively implement the provisions of the law. She also gave a quarterly status report and update of ongoing and recently completed activities of the office, along with information regarding current or pending activities of the Legislative Audit Bureau, which may impact the UW system. As you know, we annually go through an audit of our financial statements by the Legislative Audit Bureau, which is underway currently. Discussion of the draft operations and audit plan for 2012. Because of the recent serious allegations of misconduct and illegal activity related to minors at prominent universities, the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee will require, as part of its calendar year 2012 audit plan, an audit review of reporting requirements of crimes against minors. The audit will include an evaluation of the adequacy of policies related to reporting of crimes against minors at the University of Wisconsin system colleges, universities, and extensions. The audit review is part of a 2-part strategy to ensure that thousands of children who visit UW institutions are protected. The second part of the strategy will involve a risk assessment aimed at prevention. This will ensure that our practices and policies in conducting sport camps and educational programs that invite minors to our campuses are designed with safeguards in place to protect those children. This work will be done by the University of Wisconsin System Risk Management Group. While recent headlines involve scandals centered in university athletic departments, the work of the Board of Regents and the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee is to ensure that children are protected in all UW Board of Regents properties, buildings, venues, and programs. We expect to present the work of the committee, including recommendations for improvement, to the full Board of Regents in the spring. While work on this audit will commence immediately, President Riley has already asked legal counsel to provide an assessment on pertinent state and federal laws and university policy, which was sent out earlier this week. We then moved into our trust funds. Doug Hurd, UW System Trust Fund Director, reviewed the investment policy statement revisions with the committee. The committee approved changes to the way certain asset categories are defined, some minor changes to the asset allocation targets, some minor revisions to the investment policy statement, and reaffirmed its adoption of the investment policy statement for the University of Wisconsin System Trust Funds. No change to the 4% spending policy was recommended. We approved the minutes of the October 6, 2011 meeting, and we also looked at a UW-Madison contractual agreement with Synovian Pharmaceuticals, Inc. The committee approved the extension of a data research analysis agreement between UW-Madison and Synovian Pharmaceuticals. Approval of the agreement would extend the contract, which has been in place since May of 2009 through December 2014, with an estimated total value of about $682,000. We then had a report on the quarterly gifts, grants, and contracts. And UW System Vice President of Finance, Debbie Durkin, presented information regarding gift, grant, and contract awards for the period July 1st, 2011 through September 30th, 2011. Total gifts, grants, and contracts for that period were approximately $578 million, a decrease of about $94 million over the same period a year ago. Significant portion of that decline in federal awards was due to a reporting anomaly of the federal district student loans in 2010-2011. Following that, the report of the Senior Vice President, Michael Morgan, provided an update on the implementation of the flexibilities included in the 2011-13 biennial budget, Act 32, and the President's Advisory Committee recommendations. Darrell Bazell, serving as co-chair of the task force to develop a new personnel system, provided a brief summary of the first meeting of the task force. Michael then provided an update regarding the human resource system implementation and ongoing efforts to work through any implementation challenges. He stated progress is being made with HRS functionality and stability, and payroll targets were being reached. The last payroll cycle saw some improvement. To build on this improvement process, he stated the HRS Service Center project team began their second round of campus visits in November and will conclude in December. Mr. Morgan also spoke of the success of an e-benefit pilot program, a self-service program that enables employees to enroll in benefits programs online for open enrollment period and new hires, occurring at 3 institutions, Green Bay, La Crosse, and Oshkosh. Based on the success of the pilot program, the team recommended UW implement e-benefits for fall 2012 open enrollment period at all UW institutions. Talent Acquisition Manager is the PeopleSoft functionality to support the recruitment process and is scheduled to be implemented in the first quarter of 2012. The initial rollout next year will include functionality for unclassified recruitment processes only. The current estimates are projected at a budget gap which is within the project contingency. The budget is being closely monitored and all opportunities to reduce costs are being considered. The project funding gap for service center operations will not result in any increased costs to UW institutions. So on behalf of the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee, I now move the adoption of Resolution 12C, approval of the contractual agreement between the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and the CERNET Educational Development Company Limited. Resolution 12E1, adoption of the investment policy as revised. And Resolution 12F2, approval of the contractual agreement between the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Synovian Pharmaceutical, Inc.
Is there a second? Is there any item we'd like to take out for separate discussion? I've had a question just before. in the last couple of days as to whether we're actually voting on this particular audit that might emphasize the one about reporting requirements of crimes against minors, that were we taking any action, and that's not a action item. It's being, obviously it's going to go forward, I think, based on the conversation at the committee yesterday.
I think the conversation was very clear that it not only go forward, but it be the #1 priority.
Exactly. It was going to go to the top. And, but I just, we can certainly discuss that further, or any of the other items that are now out there for vote. But I just wanted, I've had that, several folks ask whether we take any affirmative action on that, and we didn't actually vote, but certainly the direction given yesterday by the committee was, as Mike indicated, very clear as to we want it done and done thoroughly, but promptly too.
Yeah. If there's any action, if the results if there's any action to take, will come from after the completion of the audit.
And finally, just, and I'll call it Mark in a minute, the report that Kevin, that went to the chancellors yesterday and us, it stated the 7th, and the police chiefs, et cetera, is also in your package. Regent Mark? Yeah.
I just wanted to add that that was the strong sense of the committee, but that was also the recommendation of Senior Vice President Morgan, the audit staff. I mean, everybody was in accord with that.
Correct.
That should be on the list, but it also should be moved to #1 on the list.
Thank you. Thank you. Jerry?
Do we have adequate resources and staff to accomplish this particular assignment, as important as it is?
Okay.
So we're going to reallocate some of our resources in the audit office to ensure that we have everyone we need to be on place to get it done in a timely manner.
How soon do you think Mike you don't like microphones, I can see either. Yeah.
You know, Judy would say you should speak into the microphone.
If Judy were here, yeah.
Would you restate the question? We intend to get it completed by spring, but hopefully we can have something before you with recommendations by May of 2012, if not earlier.
Jerry, anything else on that?
That really was part of the committee discussion, that you have an audit function, you list areas that you feel need attention based on the review of the audit department, and then you prioritize them.
Anything else? All right, we've got a motion, a second in front of us on the... Jerry, do you have anything else? I'm sorry. Okay. We have a motion and a second on the different resolutions. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Mike, anything else?
That concludes my report.
Okay. I'll call on Katie to present the resolution of appreciation to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for hosting our December meeting.
As a student here at UW-Madison, I have particularly enjoyed this board meeting with the opportunity to welcome all of you to this campus that I call home. In my brief time here, I can say that this place, the students, staff, faculty, and administration are truly remarkable. Prior to attending Madison, many friends talked about the uniqueness of UW, the particular special circumstances that compose for students what many call the Wisconsin experience. I have to admit, I was a little bit skeptical, but have learned very quickly that this university is an incredible institution that equips students not only with a world-class education, but an environment to pursue entrepreneurial ambitions and endless leadership and activism opportunities through cultivating for each student the unique Wisconsin experience. I can tell you that my experience and time here only makes me grow more fond of this university that I will be proud to call my alma mater. I need to acknowledge and give a special thanks to Interim Chancellor David Ward for his incredible hospitality and genuine love for this campus and university system that has played such an integral role in my transition here as a student, as well as my transition into a role as the student regent. I would also like to give thanks to Provost Paul DeLuca, Vice Chancellor Darrell Bazell, Lori Burkham, I don't know if she's here, Dean of Students, who has been a tremendous mentor and friend to me on campus, as well as all of their colleagues who have graciously hosted us these past few days. And in true Madison fashion, I can't think of a better way to express my sincere appreciation, as well as my fellow Regents' appreciation, to this campus, other than saying, "On Wisconsin." So now for the resolution of appreciation to UW-Madison. Whereas the University of Wisconsin-Madison is an extraordinary educational asset, recognized worldwide for its teaching, research, and outreach efforts. And whereas a century after the birth of the Wisconsin idea, the principle that the university should improve people's lives beyond the classroom, the university continues to exert its positive influence on main streets across Wisconsin and globally through transformative outreach programs involving faculty, students, and staff. And whereas UW-Madison was ranked among the top 10 American public universities in 2012's rankings issued by U.S. News & World Report. And whereas UW-Madison, for the first time in its history, conferred more than 10,000 degrees in a single year, 2010-2011, with an average time to degree of 4.06 years. And whereas the university's research mission has continually grown in scope and prestige, evidenced by the fact that more than $1 billion worth of vital transformative research is conducted at UW-Madison each year. And whereas UW-Madison is a strong component of a healthy Wisconsin economy, as shown in an economic analysis that estimated the university has a $12.4 billion annual impact on the state's economy, and along with its affiliated organizations and startup companies, supports 128,146 jobs and generates $614 million in state tax revenue. And whereas UW-Madison's administration is seeking creative and cost-effective means to provide budgetary self-help to the campus through initiatives such as educational innovations and administrative excellence. And whereas the Regents enjoyed experiencing the newly expanded Chazen Museum of Art and applauded its expanded role as a hub for the arts on the UW-Madison campus and as a leading cultural resource for the region. Be it therefore resolved that the University of Wisconsin System Board of Regents hereby thanks Interim Chancellor David Ward, Provost Paul DeLuca, and all of their colleagues for advancing teaching, research, outreach, and for generously extending the campus's hospitality and sharing their thought-provoking presentations as they hosted this December 2011 Board of Regents meeting.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you again to Chancellor Ward and everybody associated. It's been a great visit. What a building. What a terrific building to be in. Are there any communications, petitions, and memorials? Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute recess and then reconvene in closed session. We're going to be in a different room. We're going to be on the Northwoods room on the 3rd floor.